Wait.
I,
What are the qualities of a man cave, really? Though, I mean, do they? I mean, do men cave really have musical instruments? I mean, that seems just like
right, that's kind of what makes this unique. But it said it was talking about conservative podcast hosts
oh,
having bricks or paneling as like a sign of like being funded, as opposed to like low budget left wing people of the same sort of caliber having no funding and using like neon lights. I mean, not neon lights, using LEDs to light their walls to
oh my
change the
word.
colors of their environments very inexpensively. And then so they were like a man cave, the man cave um like hideout, like a bunker sort of like survivalist thing. Like the cool conservative would have like bricks or paneling.
I would never
They would
use the
have
word cool and
neon
conservative
lights.
together. Hi there, Lasita. You're
They
just
said,
and we've just been chatting. This is Dave Myers. He's joined from Austin, and he was saying I was commenting how much I love his home. I've been to his home, and he was saying that he felt called out because it had many of the features that were listed. You do have a neon sign. It had many of the features
I
listed
know,
of
I'm
a
telling
man
you,
cave.
I'm trying to tell you how many features there were. It was very many of what I have, and I had to just bow my head. But I
Well, you have musical
honestly, I think a man cave has to have like a video game system, a giant TV,
yeah.
and some sort of chair that's designed for never getting up that has like cup holders. To me, that's a man cave.
And
You know,
you don't
this
have
is,
any of those things, so you're good. You're in the clear. You're
but still, I really got called out. But yeah,
Hi
this
there,
private
Lucita. Thank you so
tavern
much for
thing,
joining.
yeah.
Yeah, we're just kind of just bantering a little bit as we get ready. So this is actually something we do every week in Santa Fe. We've been doing it about 4 years now, maybe 5 years. And we're meeting up at my good friend Mike's gallery space. You can kind of see we have some beverages. And we have that's actually a pachinko machine there. So this is decidedly not a man cave, but
Uh,
we do
so
have a
I'm getting to
I don't know.
so
parlor.
I'm
Exactly.
getting to come in on Zoom to your regular Monday evening event.
Yeah,
Yay!
yeah. I mean, we used to do it on Zoom, and then for a while we didn't, and we started putting it on Zoom again, just because it seemed like it'd be nice to include more people. And we typically have a topic. We had a couple of suggestions for a topic this week. I was thinking we might do the centers and just go through the not self themes of the centers because we have Brian here who is kind of learning human design in his first year, and there may be a couple
Well,
of joining us. Yeah.
except that I completely hate talking about not self
So
themes of
maybe we
any.
can switch it. Let's do the self. Let's do the true self themes of the undefined centers.
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
Yes.
That would be fantastic.
Yes.
I would love to change that up and to just so we will just go through the centers, but it's more just I wanted to introduce the notion of the defined, undefined, and how they operate differently. And so that would actually be perfect. And I would welcome you to chime in on any of them, or we can just open up
Okay.
each center. We can open
Well,
up to discussion.
well, since I'm in a talkative mood today, I
So we'll just
probably
we'll get started in
hiding.
about yeah, we'll get started in about 3 minutes or so. Hi there. How's it going? So we're doing a Zoom this time. So we have some friends visiting from Zoom. We have Lasita and Dave. Yeah. Oh, no, you're great. Okay. So Mike, if you wanna come a little closer to us, so we can hear you. Maybe just kind of move it around a little bit, just so we can get everybody in here as much as possible. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, it's raining. It started raining. You can really feel that shift of seasons here. It's really changed. So, and then Brian, I don't know if you want to move into the screen. You don't have to. You're kind of the mysterious off-screen guest, but I think it'd be nice if you want to just scoot over a little bit.
Okay. We're also joined by Kiki, a 4/6 self-projected projector with 2 channels, right?
Yes, I don't. Yes.
The 1/8 and the
Yeah.
4323, if memory serves.
You probably remember better than I do.
Yeah, so I think today we'll just be going through the centers. I kind of thought we would just start with, well, I mean, let's kind of go through one at a time, talking about the centers, who has them defined, who has them undefined. I personally have found a lot of value from the not self. Just, we were just talking, how Lucito was saying she doesn't like, it's not a favorite topic of hers to talk about the not self of the centers, because you can actually get a lot of value from talking about how the centers are meant to operate or how they can ideally operate. I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but that the not self can be a hang up, that people can get hung up on this idea of, I have an undefined center, that must be something I should be scared of, and we really have nothing to be scared of, right? I don't know if that's fair, but yeah, but either way, I thought we could just go through the centers, and just that would be a good kind of introductory material, and just talk about some of the keynotes of the centers and really what they are about. And we can really start anywhere. There are various hierarchies. There's something that Ra calls the not self hierarchy. Maybe we can go in the opposite of that, in the spirit of not talking about the not self. So yeah, maybe start with the throat center. The throat center is the one that he considers the outer shell, I guess, if you will.
It's the first to be developed in the fetus. The first thing in fetal development is the throat.
Yeah.
I forget which gate it is.
Right. So in the development of the fetus, when the fetus is still in the womb, the throat is the very first center to develop. And that is an interesting point. It's kind of the outermost. It's the way that we express, and I would say it's what people notice. Like if you have an undefined throat, they may notice that, or if you have a defined throat, certain things people notice about you. I've found that it is something like the outer shell through which everything. And also, you pointed out that the actual physical throat as a. I mean, what you're explaining
the thyroid?
The thyroid, exactly. The thyroid. If we can mute phones, please. The thyroid is actually the closest. Is it a gland or?
Yeah, that's the gland that's associated with the.
But it's the closest to the skin.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Or
That's
it's
cool.
no, didn't you say that? Literally. Okay, I swear Mike said something like it's
That's cool.
maybe someone else did, but it's really the gland that's like the closest to the surface in some way. And so it's interesting that the throat is kind of the closest to the surface in terms of, if we were to look at the depth of the centers and what is kind of the deepest, innermost center versus the center that we show to others and we express to others.
What I know about the thyroid is it's the organ that tells every cell in the entire body when to consume oxygen. And so it is, sometimes they call it like the executive or whatever. It has a sort of command center function. So it's funny how everything seeks the throat. The human design seeks the throat center, and then the thyroid itself is sort of the CEO of the body, you could say.
That is, yeah. And then of course, the relation of the throat to manifestors, who all have defined throats.
Oh yeah, and are all very executive.
And have an executive CEO quality.
Right.
I don't know how you feel about that, Dave. So, okay, so who has a defined throat here? We know Dave does. He's a manifestor. Okay, everyone, how about you, Lucita? You have a defined throat also? Oh my word, I'm the only one. This is why I'm the one who won't stop talking. See, I'm the kind of running narrator for all the throat energy.
This is statistically regular though, right? It's only like 18% of people have undefined throat.
It is true that the throat is the most frequently defined on account of having 11 gates. So it is the most common to be defined. So then maybe I should ask the defined throat folks, rather than what's the commonality about them, what can you tell me about the undefined throat?
The undefined throat. So we're not talking about not self, though. We're not doing any conditioning.
Well, I mean, just in general, what do you have to say about it? I mean,
I would say that the undefined throat feels some sort of pressure to say what is going unsaid, to account for what is being unaccounted for, and to materialize what ought to be materialized. And because it's taking in all the throats around it, it's it can be kind of indiscriminate about what needs to be said, what it thinks needs to be said or whatever. So it can have a hard time prioritizing.
Like, yeah, I've kind of described it as being a running narrator, almost like a golf narrator, and he's walking up to the hole. And he's
People with
about to
undefined
putt.
throat? Or-
Yeah, just
I get
that we
yeah.
are the narrators of what's going on. Mike is having a sip. We have a doggy here. This is Anu, right?
Yes.
Anu is really excited to be here, and Kiki is drawing, I believe. Or are those notes?
Notes.
Oh, they're notes. Okay, well, I saw it was a sketchbook. So yeah, but okay, well, and then it was interesting in Brynja Magnuson's talk at HDHD. Did you get to see that on yin mysticism? Anyone? Okay. I don't know if Dave caught that. You caught that, Lisita. You liked that talk.
Yeah.
That-
Well, I didn't catch all of her talk, but I heard the whole of the interview that happened, and they discussed
yeah.
the undefined throat then and how much the undefined throat people want the defined throat people to protect them and to actually encourage them to speak what they need to say. And she talked about how often she's been suppressed by everybody else talking over her.
Mm.
This was I don't know how to pronounce her name, Brynja.
Yeah, Brynja.
Whatever.
Is yeah.
And it was the first time I'd actually really heard an undefined throat person speak about the experience. And then I wrote to Jonah and I asked him to talk about it. And he wrote me a very eloquent text. And I was really grateful to hear more about it because I haven't seen things in common between people with undefined throats. It's just, and I totally don't agree with the idea that they're trying to attract attention. That's just not my experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on the person. And if we think of just mechanically being receptive, what it is for me is that when I was younger, I would often waste a lot of energy talking at the wrong time when someone's not paying attention. And now I've become wise, you could say, or learned very much from watching all these defined throats. That's a really great way to speak. That's a really great way, how he took a pause there, how she said it this way, how she described it. It's kind of like learning how to speak in a compelling way from others, and then even picking up their mannerisms if I spend a lot of time with them, where I don't necessarily have my own set of fixed mannerisms. So having an undefined throat is almost a chameleonic throat. But like any of the undefined centers, and hi there, I see you've joined as well, Genoa. We're talking about the undefined throat. I've noticed, that it can overdo it. I can strain my throat too much. It's typically if I'm pushing something. Like a good example would be, taking a long flight. If I'm talking to someone, if I meet somebody who's sitting next to me and they're really interested in what I have to say, I can talk and actually not strain my throat. But if I'm just talking for the sake of hearing my own voice, by the end of it, I'll actually be hoarse. And I've noticed that I can sometimes wish that others would talk, actually. I think that's what you were getting at, Mike, how the undefined throat feels the pressure to speak, that there's an openness or a lack of defense against that throat pressure that's saying this needs to come out. And so if I see something happening and no one's talking about it, it's kind of the undefined throat who's like, look at that, what's going on? Kind of. But it is interesting. There is something about attention. I mean, I guess we could say it's unfair to characterize the undefined throat as always looking for attention or something like that. But it's definitely learning about the correct use of attention and learning how not to misuse or overuse people's attention.
Well, and attention, attention is how we create the Maya. And we know that the throat is what brands on the Maya, what imprints upon the Maya. If you look at design of forms, there's no throat in a plant, but there is in a bug or a rodent or a lizard. And all these things, compared to humans, they don't really imprint on the Maya in a very meaningful way, but they still make nests. They still create desire lines through patches of grass. They still shape the world through their throat. And you could say that a plant maybe does that the way its roots might upend a sidewalk or something, but it does so generically. That plant doesn't really have habits, it's not seeking, it's not going out and like putting a print on the Maya.
Right, the plant doesn't have a throat center, so it's not
Right.
actively interesting.
Or microorganisms, right? It's only in their assembly that they really affect the Maya.
Hmm.
And so for human, you know, we affect the Maya in such more complicated and sophisticated ways. And the attention is really what confirms something within the Maya. You know, like Ross says, it's like something only really exists in the Maya if people refer to it, right? When you have to use your throat to refer to it. So you can build something or whatever, but it doesn't really exist to anyone until they're thinking relationally about it, right? Like a mountain can exist over the village for many centuries, but until someone has to talk about the mountain, it has no impact on the lives of those people in any sort of cultural way.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also the throat is how either through language or through action we change status. I mean, there are actions that we take, but there's also just the action of speaking, like saying, I now pronounce you man and wife. That changes the status of those people.
Right.
And so there is a sort of ability to interact with the world in that way. Well, any comments?
I'd love to ask Gemma, who's been chuckling in the background, to say something.
Well, being quite a talker myself, I find it amusing, Jonah, that you say, "Oh, I really want to hear other people talk." Of course, it would help if I gave them some space to do so. But that's just amusing. You know, it's just kind of the way designs work. I have one of the most talkative channels, the 731. I mean, really, there's really hardly any channel that can talk quite like the 731 can, and seems to want to, whether I want to or not. You know, channels just going off, influencing other people, and I just watch it doing that. And often I'll say to myself, "Well, listen to that guy go off. He seems to know what he's talking about."
I should listen to him sometime.
I know, wouldn't I? When I used to do a lot of astrology readings and psychic type readings many years ago, I started reading 40 some years ago. You know, I'd listen to myself and I really should, maybe I should save some of these tapes and listen to myself sometimes. See, he's giving some pretty good advice. But that's just how your design starts living your life, and you get to just watch it do its thing. You know, it's not even, you know, it doesn't necessarily even feel like me that it does all of that. It just does.
Yeah.
All, you know, it's like how you go to the record store and you see this cardboard cutout of the Man in Black. What was his name?
Johnny Cash.
Johnny Cash, right. You see the cardboard cutout. I sometimes think of myself as like this cardboard cutout, and you just stand it up in the corner and put a mic in front of it. It just starts doing its thing. You know, that's how I see my design. And then the colors and tones are much more, the variable in the colors and tones are much more what it's like to be me, to feel myself in the midst of all of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what I had to say.
No, that's a good point. And I did a talk at the conference on the 3 pillars of human design: mechanics, awareness, and purpose. And I did distinguish between the mechanical, like the channels, versus the awareness when you're talking about the colors and tones and variable and all of that, and how you experience
Right.
yourself. Yeah. Well, let's move on. Let's do the head and the Ajna center together, because of course.
Shouldn't we ask Dave to say something too?
Oh, sure, if you'd like to. I try not to ask manifestors to respond. I hope that he will just jump in, but we can inform him that we'd love to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, good idea.
I don't know. I'm good, I guess. Well, I don't even know like what the subject is anymore. I'm just kind of sitting back and listening.
Well, you have a double.
Are we talking about
the throat?
You're talking about defined throats?
Yeah, defined throat, undefined throat. You know, and you have 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe the it's not that the undefined throat so much is looking for attention, but it kind of has the like counterfeit stamina to keep going when the defined throat might just be like, I'm not trying to compete with everything that's going on here. Like y'all can like try to shout over the music. I'm done. Like I'm not getting involved. And then the undefined throats are just like, yeah. They're like going, they're trying to get each other, they're trying to keep up with it.
I love
And I
that.
feel like that,
That stamina, that's a really interesting way to think of it, like the amplified stamina of where you might give up and where in my wisdom I will give up, otherwise the next day I'll have lost my voice. But if I'm just carried away and kind of swept away in the amplification, it's really loud and I'm shouting over the music, not even realizing it.
mm-hmm.
I really like that. That's a really, I've never thought of counterfeit stamina in that way, but I guess it is similar to the sacral, not knowing when, enough is enough. Each of these centers are going to have a version of
Or the
that.
ego, counterfeit willpower. I've heard Ross use that term,
Mhm.
counterfeit willpower.
Yeah, and they can each
But
kind of,
yeah, same kind of thing.
right. I have an undefined solar plexus
what?
that can be overeating or over enjoying or not really kind of having this. Yeah, that's a really interesting way to approach it. Well, let's look at the head and the ajna, and I'll look at those together only because it's possible to have a defined ajna and not a defined head, but you can't have a defined head and not have a defined ajna. So they do have this, because it can only be defined through the ajna. And I remember early on, there was a nice mantra. This guy, Lars Hagland, he's a 5'2", and it's hard to, well, you're a 5'2", Lisita, aren't you? You're a 5'2", yeah. Yeah, and he gave me this nice nugget, and there's always the sense that the 5'2s know so much, and they do, and we really want to get it out of them, but because of that second line, it's like, give it to me, and sometimes it's okay, maybe if they want to. But what he had told me was really interesting, and it actually made a lot of sense to me. It's that I'm always trying to solve everyone's problems and trying to figure everything out, right? And it was true. Like if somebody's like, what actor was in that film? I would think about it and think about it and think about it. And he just said, just say to yourself, don't know, don't care. Don't know, don't care. Just tell yourself that. I don't know, I don't care. It's not about me. I don't have to know that. I don't have to care about that. And it might sound cold because obviously I do care about a lot of things. If someone comes to me and they need something, I can help them. I obviously do care.
And you have gate 50.
I have gate 50, so I might have a mechanical responsibility for certain things, but really the don't know, don't care helped me remind myself that if I'm in a conversation and I think of something to say, someone's talking about a place I've been, and I'm like, I should tell them I've been there. Then the conversation changes. I can let go of that and never come back to it. And if there's an actor in a film and I don't know that actor, and I know that if I just thought about it a little bit, I could figure it out, I can just let go of that and I can go to my grave never knowing what that film was. So that was really freeing for me because I felt like up until that point in my life, anytime I thought of something to say, I waited for my turn to speak and said it. After that, I could let go. The conversation could move. It could change, completely let go, might never come back. Up until that time, somebody had a question. I would be on Google for hours trying to solve that question for them, trying to get the knowledge, trying to figure it out. And after this, I started to just kind of like, I let the mechanics, it's almost like you were saying about that 731, Genoa, how it will just speak. Well, my mechanics will do things, but a lot of what they'll do is not try to solve or figure things out. If I let it go, it will go. And I think I was so afraid. I was really afraid of being humiliated or embarrassed. There's something similar between the ajna and the ego that people don't necessarily pick up on, which is that there can be this real social stigma about not knowing. You've been tricked, you've been fooled. How could you believe that? I mean, even when I was first getting into human design, I was so worried that it would turn out to be a sham and I would be found out and someone would make fun of me for, you know, how silly you fell for that kind of attitude. And so my journey personally with the head and ajna has been one of really letting go of needing to know things, and also letting go of a lot of the fear of being humiliated for not knowing, for being tricked, things like that. Yeah. But of course, I mean, I still like to know things. I still like to learn. I still like when a solution, you know, comes out. It's not like I'm anti thinking. I enjoy thinking. So I don't know if anyone has any comments on that. But,
The mind and
I have,
oh, please. Yeah.
sorry, I do want to hear from Michael, sorry. I have undefined head and ajna, and I am absolutely addicted to learning, and that may be part of it. But I don't feel like I have to show anyone or prove to anyone that I know things, although maybe that's what I'm doing here today.
No,
But
absolutely not. I know you personally, and
I just want to learn and learn and learn.
Mhm.
So let me hand it over to.
No, I feel the same way, and that's a great point. And having known you personally, I've never once. I mean, us undefined head ajna people are pretty sensitive to when somebody is trying to show off what they know and so on. And no, I've never gotten that from you, not even once. And that's a really good point, that it is this openness to, yeah, that we can actually enjoy our openness. We don't have to think of it as something that we should shy away from. Like, I have undefined head ajna, I shouldn't be thinking. Like, no, we can really enjoy thinking. We absolutely can.
well, there's a lot there. Okay, so one thing, the whole like the second ego of the ajna or whatever. I think of course Steve Rhodes and his respect keynotes for the ajna tone binary, and with the idea of humiliation and the respect, to me, you know, it's bound up in prestige, and it is, again, like the big experiment that we're doing here by being incarnate or whatever is to develop this galactic ajna to sort of exercise what it means to have self-reflected consciousness in these separate bodies or whatever. And we are sort of honoring form through the correct externalization or delivery of the mind, you know. So it's like we are sort of only the mind, like form on its own has no privilege, has no hierarchy, has no honor or whatever. And so if we are procuring and providing the correct respect, the correct privilege onto form, that's kind of what we're here to do. That's a big part of what this experiment is all about.
The delivery of outer authority.
The delivery of outer authority, right? Providing the mind to the other. Yeah. But there's another avenue I wanted to go down there. Or we can,
no. I mean, that if you have it now,
well, just the whole thing about so if you have defined head and ajna, you're very aware. It's easier to accept that nobody has thoughts, that you just beam into thoughts. Thoughts come through you. You are holding those thoughts. They're not yours. No thoughts are ever yours. No ideas are ever yours. And these defined head people, it's like they tune in to a station. They have a bandwidth of things that they can receive, and the undefined doesn't. And so they are willing to think about anything. They're willing to tune in to whatever. And I have a slightly heretical take on mental projectors that has to do with this, but I can wait until later.
I mean, I want to hear it. Do you have any comments before we hear Mike's take on mental projectors? Because that sounds pretty juicy.
Yeah, so
Well, I think we're going to have to hear that.
Well, so the basic thing is, I think that divination as a practice is like going to be more valid for anyone with defined ajna, and certainly for people with defined ajna and head. And then for mental projectors, if it's only the ajna head, in a way, I feel that divination is very much what their authority process looks like, because they're relegating the mind to a role of witness to life, to a perceptive role, rather than someone who's trying to order their information intake, trying to rationalize, trying to strategize. So if a defined head and ajna is walking around, the likelihood that, so they like see a book that's splayed open to a certain page, and the likelihood of them picking that up and it's relevant to them is a little higher than it is for the undefined head ajna when they're in not self, at least, because they're likely to pick up any book. They're likely to find the meaning anywhere, trace the pattern anywhere, look for the signs, because they can tune in to any station, so to speak. They can follow.
I see. It's less trustworthy for an undefined head ajna to, or at least someone, and you were using the term not self. I understand that that doesn't have to be, there's another version of that, which is simply saying someone who really knows themselves and is really had enough experience to gain the wisdom to have made enough mistakes and so on in life.
Right,
that
like
they-
you're saying, you don't
yeah.
think about random shit anymore. You don't have to look up the
Yeah.
name of the actor or whatever.
Right, but most of my life I was,
Mm.
and so I guess I see what you're saying is that for someone like myself with undefined head ajna, it's actually true. I was probably doing a lot of divinatory exercises where I would say, "Oh my, that should be the decision I should make,"
Mm.
because
Oh yeah.
I didn't yet have at that point this sacral awakening to something in me that will truly resist the wrong decision and will respond to
Mm.
something. So because I mean it was in me, but I was ignoring it. It was like something that I was kind of second guessing and mentally rationalizing away.
Mm.
And so then I would find something like, oh, this tarot card says I should be in this relationship. So
Mm.
therefore I don't have to respond or do I want to be in this relationship?
Right.
I can trust the card. But then you're saying, I guess your heretical take on mental projectors is that because they don't have the other mechanisms for decision making.
Right. The closest
Yeah.
thing they have to inner authority is allocating the mind to its proper position. That because it's a witness for all of us. Obviously, it's not just mental projectors that are supposed to develop passenger consciousness, right? But for them, it's like the development of that is sort of the seat of their authority. When the mind is
Yeah.
allowed to be a witness, that's the closest thing to authority they have, because they're using their consistent mental access to it basically in the proper configuration. Because in the same way that like you look at format channels and each of them are like consistent syntheses of the unconscious, in a way those head pressure channels are all consistent syntheses of the conscious, right? Ways of assembling the conscious that you can keep coming back to. You know, I only have one way of synthesizing consciousness, but someone with undefined head ajna, you can understand anyone's way of thinking, you know, when you have undefined head ajna.
And that's an interesting point as well. There's so much redoubling in the human design system where something like personality and design kind of being conscious, unconscious, and yet you end up in these interesting situations where someone has design head ajna or they have personality format channels. That's something I never really had thought of. I thought of the parallels of the
pressure
pressure
yeah.
centers, but not in that way. And also I would kind of think of the head as the unconscious and the ajna more conscious. But again,
Right.
we can't go too far with that because obviously the channels there can be either personality or design or a combination.
But a whole channel involves consciousness because it involves ajna, whereas format channels, there's no awareness center in the mix at all.
I see. That's a really good point. There's an awareness there. Yeah, that's a really good point. A lot to unpack there. I wish we had Teo here. I'm hoping he'll join. I've been inviting him and he's been getting more interested.
And so
yeah.
just a reminder, the bulk of what I was saying about mental projectors and using divination in that way is mostly about the head ajna ones. And Teo is an example of an ajna throat projector, and I think it's a little bit different. You know, there's the sounding board element, there's the externalization element too.
I see. Right. That's a good point that we don't usually distinguish between the head ajna mental projectors and the ajna throat. And having a defined throat does introduce a more consistent sounding board element, perhaps. Although I also wouldn't say that someone with only the head and ajna defined should not sound board,
Right.
because there is also an aspect of that. That's an interesting point as well. And also when you were talking about, the throat with attention, I did think of what you've said in describing projectors as clarifying through attention. And that is kind of an interesting idea as well. That part of what the projector can do is to help clarify things through the correct use of their own attention and what they're paying attention to.
That's their great commodity, in the same way that the great commodity of a generator is their energy.
I like that. I like that. It's an interesting approach. So, okay, well, we've gone far afield in our
How do you-
Ajna meanderings. Yeah, do you have any comments, Lasita?
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, these manifestors, I want to encourage them to participate.
Yeah, well, please. Yeah, if there's any participation that you'd like.
Well, Dave,
Thank you for the encouragement. I feel like there's just like so much just got said. It's for me to just like pick something to talk about. I just feel like it should just keep going. Oh, if and I don't, yeah, I don't got nothing right this minute. It's
Mhm.
just,
Well,
I-
I'm
going.
sure Genoa does have a lot. So Genoa,
keep thinking of the fact that as soon as we make any generalization, we can be guaranteed to find exceptions to it. That's just part of trying to delineate things intellectually. My mother always used to say, I love generalizations as long as they glitter. You know, but every time we talk about the body graph with some kind of concrete reference, I always find that to be very refreshing. So as we're talking about these things, you know, I'm wondering, as an example, Jonah, what your activated potentials are on your throat. You know, so when you're talking about your throat, I want to know, well, what part of that throat or what aspect of that throat truly wants and needs to interact and connect with other people in order to have the opportunity to evolve. Because it's through interaction that, you know, these activated potentials engage with the world. And, you know, so I guess that's why I'm going off and being so obnoxious about generalizations is like I want to hear something more specific. So what kind of what are your potentials on your open throat as an example, or any
Well,
open
yeah,
side?
12 and 45, but I just want to point out what a beautiful approach that is of reminding us about the hanging gates and their interactive quality and how much we are interpersonal and we are social beings, and that
Yeah.
these hanging gates, these potentials do they are, I mean, that's something I've noticed also and kind of thought about, which is that before human design, any hanging 12 would do, or sorry, any hanging 22 rather. It's like I meet a hanging 22 and I'm just, you know, immediately it's really what I've noticed is that the longer I've practiced living strategy and authority, the more I've honored my own inner decision making mechanism, which has actually said yes or no. And a lot of the times it will say no in a way that I might assume would be yes. Whereas if you almost like a reality show where you're going to play matchmaker, if you take someone with bridging 22 and then you take someone with the hanging 22 and you introduce them, it's like a joke. They're like immediately romantic, right? There's an immediate romance there, and it might not be that they're actually really they're, they might actually be I don't know about this one, but the electromagnetic can be so strong it can override and pull us away from ourselves into this thing that's bigger than us. It's funny because when you look at any two people, the chemistry between them is both limiting as well as activating things in a way that feels bigger than any one person. It's like, wow, this thing is really bigger than us. But I guess personally speaking, yeah, I mean, my 12 and my 45 are always reaching out to the other who will listen, or reaching out to the other who can help kind of in the tribal things. But I've definitely noticed where I used to just be such a sucker, particularly for the 22. If there's a 22 there and it would just like, I would just be jelly to them, a nice young woman when I was a young man, and she has 22 and I have 12, and it doesn't matter if I'm in a relationship or monogamous, it would be like, you're flirting with her, you're romantic with her. And I was, because I didn't there was a desperation of that reaching across the chasm, not even realizing it. And of course, I'd be denying it and saying, no, there's no romance there. Well, it's 1222. I mean, that just makes it more romantic when you can't be together, right? So that would just make it even more of a
Do you
unrequited.
have it red or black?
It is red for me, so it is unconscious. It's my automatic.
Yeah, me too.
It's in my
Me
blood.
too.
Yeah.
And it's the only
Me
gate
too.
without any solar plexus.
Particularly intoxicating.
Yeah. And as Mike also pointed out, it's the only gate I have out of the 14 gates in the solar plexus channels. So it's the only gate of sexuality I have. Of the 14 gates of sexuality, only one of them is active for me. That's my unconscious 12. So, yeah.
Well, gate 22 is particularly intoxicating,
That too. Yeah. That too. Absolutely.
charming beyond belief. But I mean, it's because there's
Yeah.
so much
I wanted to
potential
say
there.
really quick, we're joined by Nancy as well, and feel free to jump in at any point, Nancy, if you like. We're just talking about the centers and just kind of having an open discussion. So
I'm going to need to drop out just because I got some work to do. And sorry for not meeting up this weekend, Joan. I was really looking forward to it, but I didn't even have time to tell you I couldn't do it.
oh, completely fine. You know, I'm here to respond. So if you ever if I can ever help in any way, just let me know.
Please, please, thank you very much. All right, I'm going to be on my way. But hey, it's been great to drop in.
Thank you. Thanks for dropping in, Jenna.
If I can figure out where the button is, I'll be fine.
So
There we
there
go.
is one point I wanted to make, especially for the newcomers, which is that if a center is defined, that means there's a channel between that center and another center. You can't have definition without a channel. So it's super important which channel is defined. And if it's undefined, which dormant potentials are on the undefined center. So part of what I teach about undefined centers is that they're unpredictable rather than a generalization of everybody with such and such an undefined center behaves the same way. They behave a myriad of different ways, and it depends on the whole design. So I just want to put that out into the mixture.
I appreciate that so much because that is actually my answer quite often when I'm asked, well, what does human design say about, you know, and there are so many questions that we can come up with, which are not necessarily the correct questions because they're looking for an oversimplification. And it's actually important to remember, like, yes, we can characterize certain qualities and attributes and gates and lines, and we might even be able to characterize undefined centers, but that unpredictability, as you're talking about, yeah, I mean, there are going to be certain things that are predictable, like if a 12 meets a 22, there's going to be a chemistry that's going to go one way or the other, and it's either going to build in something or it's going to kind of push the other away and say, no, I'm not interested, and there's going to be a chemical reaction. But even that is somewhat unpredictable. We can't really say which side it's going to go on. I mean, I've met undefined throat people who talk a lot, and I've met ones who are silent. We really can't say, oh, you're going to talk a lot because you have this, or you're not going to talk because you have that. And also I see,
I have another.
yeah, go on.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying hi to Casey.
No, go.
It's an open discussion.
Oh.
We're talking about the throat now. And yeah, please, Dave, sorry.
Something that seems relevant about the throat, defined or undefined, is that Ra would talk about when he was giving readings, he would look at whether there was if the throat was solar plexus heavy versus spleen heavy, like pointing either way, and that the emotional people would be, not even if they're emotional, but if their throat was emotionally like accentuated on the emotional side, that they would be more open and more just willing to talk about themselves and stuff. And that like if they were spleen people, they'd be more reserved and just sort of like, all right, like just taking in their readings. And that he would sort of tailor the way that he presented the readings to these people based on like whether or not their throat center was emotional or splenic, regardless of activation. And that could also have that that dichotomy could have some effect on like whether people are trying to get attention, quote unquote, or being reserved. Like there's kind of like this duality to throat expression, like in general.
Mm. That's really cool. And I'd actually never heard that. That's such an interesting thought. I mean, maybe that should actually be a nice segue into talking about the spleen and the solar plexus. Maybe we can do the two of those together, unless anyone else has any final comments on the throat, head, or ajna. And I see
I
Kristen.
think the other
Yeah.
point was that when I was early in human design, I was trying to memorize how would it be if somebody's this defined center or this undefined center. And I remember talking to Ra in I think it was like a telephone situation, but it was a group forum. Maybe it was in an iVocalize classroom or something. And I have a problem with my not knowing for sure my time of birth. And so I said to him, what is the difference between a defined or an undefined solar plexus? And he said, I can't answer that because it can be so conditioned either way. And everybody has the birthright to know their time of birth. And he just focused on that.
Mm.
And it was like, for me, that was such a shock because I had tried so hard to learn the differences from books. And then he was saying, you can't say that it's going to be different. And it was impressive to hear that from him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say it's a similar answer I give to trying to guess people's defined centers, but it is somewhat one directional in the sense that people who have defined solar plexus, while they may be heavily suppressed and hiding their emotions, those emotions are there. People with the undefined solar plexus can seem identical or even more emotional. So what I really notice is people with an undefined solar plexus who are not amplifying those emotions. That's something that I really, as someone with a completely undefined solar plexus center, that one I can usually tell. But it was interesting. The last time I gave in to the game of guessing someone's undefined centers, I gave the exact same speech that Ra always would give, which is you really can't tell. You can't guess a projector because they're often living out super generator lives, and you can't guess the undefined solar plexus because they're often so amped up with emotion. But nevertheless, it was late at night and we were at an event, and this man persisted and persisted and persisted. And so I asked him questions about each center, and from a short conversation was able to accurately identify all 9 of his centers, not having run his chart. So it is possible, but I'm right there with you where it's hard to generalize. And I don't know that I could repeat that, but although the chances of it being random or something, 1 in a few 100,000. So it is definitely possible to do. I don't recommend it.
Jonah,
We don't need, right? We don't need to.
if anybody could do this idea, it would be you, to create like a Myers-Briggs question series that the objective is to get as close to the person's design as possible, like based on their birth chart, and then just like have it be like, you know, however many questions, but you know, and then like just it would be pretty amazing, like if it could come close, because you get a computer to do it, you know. You could do it. You're the guy who knows how those things work.
Well, I mean, yeah, that is definitely, it's possible. Although I also wonder how much in that case of getting all 9 right, how much of it was noticing not the content of his answers, but noticing the subtext and undercurrent, where I would say, all right, tell me about how committed you are to this and this. And he would say, oh, I'm so committed. I can do anything. And I'm like, okay, undefined ego, you know, because his reaction was so reactive and so amped up. Whereas if he was answering, it's kind of hard to read, but I see what you're saying there, and it's an
But
interesting.
aren't a lot of those Myers-Briggs questions like that? They're like anticipating your manipulative nature and answering the question
That's
is part of how the question is asked.
That's,
The
well,
good
see,
ones are.
yeah, the good ones. I mean, okay, you're really, this is good. So, yeah, I don't know where on the list that is, but it's on some list now. So,
Have an AI do it. Just
yeah.
have, yeah,
Well, so what
just
I wanted to talk about also,
commission a robot.
if we just go to the spleen and the solar plexus, and it was interesting, you were talking about some of how Ra characterized them, and I completely agree with what Lasita, what you're saying about not generalizing and how they can look so contrary and so on. I also think it's fun. I mean, the real fun part and learning should be fun, right? And the fun part that actually gets us learning and gets us engaged and actually seeing for ourselves is just to see who of your friends have a defined spleen and an undefined solar plexus. Who of your friends have a defined solar plexus and an undefined spleen? Obviously, there will be cases where they have neither, and there'll be cases where they have both. But you can start to see for yourself, and then any characterizations, well, sure, those are going to be sometimes even caricatures, even jokes, even poking fun at one or the other. But you can see where they came from, not turning that joke into a rule. But for instance, Randy Richmond, I loved his approach. JR, Randy Richmond Jr. He had a wonderful approach where he was laughing and laughing. He said to Ra that it was actually learning about the spleen and the solar plexus that convinced him that human design was real. He was a splenic projector. He had an undefined solar plexus. And he wasn't sure until Ra explained to him about the solar plexus. And he went, oh, this is real. I can see this. I can tell. And the way he could tell is he looked at all his friends with defined solar plexus and said, I have to tell them the same thing 20 times. They never get it the first time. Doesn't matter what it is. I've been telling them for years I do this thing, and they're still surprised and say, Randy, you do that? I have to tell them, and they remember, and I confirm they remember, and then they forget. Their emotional wave moves and they've completely forgotten. And then they have to learn it again. And then they've completely forgotten there. And it's only after a really long time. And he said, I get something the very first time. And he was talking to Ra, and they were kind of laughing about it. And Ra was like, yeah, we're lucky. But then he said, no, but it goes the other way too. He said, Ra, you have friends that you met 5 years ago when you took a photograph of that person, and they've changed and you've changed. And they're not even your friend anymore, but you haven't updated that photo. That there's an advantage to the solar plexus as well, because it gets the whole film. It continues to change and continues to adapt and continues to see how the story goes. So, I mean, even if that is, we can find exceptions to that where there's a solar plexus person who gets it immediately the first time and so on. It's at least a characterization that gets you thinking as a starting point. Hey, we have different advantages and disadvantages, and we came into this life packing our bags the way they were packed, so to speak, and really just noticing how my bag might be packed in a different way than yours, and I might have a huge advantage in one way and a huge disadvantage in another, and that's okay. Right? I mean, we can't necessarily even generalize, because there are going to be some defined solar plexus people who just get it right away. I mean, whatever it is. But I've noticed that. I've noticed a lot of defined solar plexus people where they've learned something and then the wave changes, and I actually remind them that's something I can give them as a gift with my undefined solar plexus when I do confront the truth. And I say, hey, just last week you were telling me that you knew this and that you were ready and that was your decision, and now it's all changed because your wave changed. And they go, thanks for reminding me. I completely forgot we had that conversation. It's almost like the wave changes and nothing else exists. Mm-hmm. And they need to be reminded sometimes, which is, I mean, that also raises the point that the undefined centers, when they're operating cleanly, can be of great service to the defined centers. I have a defined root. Undefined root people help me relax, right? Mike has a defined solar plexus. Undefined can help him kind of confront things you may have forgotten, and can help you clarify your process when they're not afraid of that confrontation,
right? When
they're not avoiding that truth.
Yeah, all the undefined centers in a way sort of like midwife the energy of the defined center. You always hear about projectors as midwives or whatever but you're typically talking about the sacral or maybe the G center in some arcane way. But anybody, regardless of type, it's sort of can be a midwife through their openness of somebody else's definition. Help bring it into clarity through being witness to it, basically, without amplifying. I mean, I guess there's a natural biochemical amplification, but without acting from
Yeah.
the
Being a clean witness,
a clean
like
witness,
like
yeah.
when I'm a clean, undefined solar plexus that can cleanly mirror back to you your emotional state and help you elaborate that state and help you amplify it in the Jungian sense through
Right.
archetypal amplification rather than through yelling and screaming and crying and all the other
Right.
stuff that the undefined solar plexus can do if it's amplifying in an unclean way, we could say. So that might be another interesting way of looking at these centers, that the undefined spleen can kind of tell the defined spleen, hey, you're
You're getting sick.
You're getting sick. Yeah. And the undefined solar plexus could tell the defined solar plexus, hey, are you sure there's not something going on that you're not telling me about? Because I'm picking up on something that's right there under the surface, and maybe there's more going on than you're letting on.
Mhm.
So yeah. And if anyone has any comments, please jump in. This is really just a group discussion. Otherwise, we have 4 centers to go.
Yeah, ego, G,
Yeah.
sacral root.
Yeah.
Well, I have both spleen and solar plexus defined. They are split, so they're in different islands of definition. But every time I had heard that idea of having amplification of everybody else's emotions, I identified with that. I'm also on the cross of identification. But I know I lived in a family where everybody else's emotions were so intense for me. And in terms of my definition, if I had been born 11 minutes earlier, I wouldn't have the emotional generator definition that I have decided I do have. I would have just had the projector channel 4816. And so that was about which I was asking the question to Ra. Like, my mother said I was born at noon, but what happens if I was born 11 minutes earlier? I'd be a different type with a different authority. And I think the thing that I do identify with having emotional definition now is the idea that it takes me a long time to make wise decisions. And that that knowing that is really very helpful to me.
Yeah, that it's okay to have that slowing down, because there can be a lot of pressure in our society to hurry up and to just, we're kind of expected to move quickly, and yeah.
And so that emotional.
What is the channel that defines your solar plexus?
59 and 6.
Well, because that would be the one.
659.
That's like the
Yeah.
source of the wave, right? So that is the emotional channel that's contagious to other emotionally defined people, because that's where the wave comes from. Like a defined solar plexus person can kind of catch the wave of the 59-6 or whatever. So there's more like, communication between people in different emotional states when one of them has the 59-6. There's more sponginess between them.
That's an interesting point, that the aura cutter, which can really cut through. Yeah, that is really interesting, that they can get in sync. Something Chetan Parkin told me, which I thought was funny at the time, but maybe there was something to it, was that whenever he did group work, he would split all of the emotionally defined people, first of all, and get them to all drum or sing or dance or clap or have some sort of synchronizing activity. And then he would have the undefined.
Breathe together.
Pardon? Is it not? Can you not hear it?
No. Keep going.
Yeah. But it's really just this synchronization. I guess it gets to 2 points. One being that it can be really chaotic when everybody's in their different state. And then also having the emotionally defined first get in sync and have some sort of group activity. They kind of all get in sync. Oh, I see the comment there. Dave said, breathe together. Yeah, exactly. That's perfect. Obviously that's so linked to the solar plexus. and yeah, to the different kinds of breathing, the tribal breathing where we're all holding hands, or collective breathing where we're moving and dancing.
The spirit.
Yeah, yeah. And then that way, once there's a sort of synchronization, it's much easier for the undefined solar plexus to then also synchronize to that. Something Barbara Ditlow said that I enjoyed was that anywhere you're undefined, it benefits you, it behooves you to have extra time to kind of show up early and let things start to build up. And that's something you noticed, Dave, at the HDHD conference, was coming right when it started. The first couple of days were more chaotic, right? Whereas I heard from, for instance, James Deans, he came 3 days before, and he was saying how lovely it was with his openness. He's actually the one who told me that Barbara Ditlow kind of quip, and just that he had taken her advice of really try to show up early for things, because with his openness, it's nice to watch the energy mount as opposed to just being thrown into it. So that there is a sort of synchronizing quality of the undefined center where it is ready to attune to what's around it. And so it can be nice rather than just being thrown into the middle of something. I mean, not that someone with all 9 centers defined would like to be thrown into the middle of it, but that they might at least be able to handle it a little more, because the more openness you have is like the more you need to kind of attune to what is around you in order to get a handle on it and not be blindsided by it and not be overrun by it and so on. So that's kind of another interesting point there. Just the attunement. I remember there's a story I've told before, so I won't go into it so much, but having an undefined solar plexus, I had a close friend who came over and he was so low on his wave, and he said, well, I'm having a really hard time with my wife, and we might split up, and I don't know, man, and we were just talking, and then my other friend came over and she had just seen her favorite band. They're both emotionally defined. She did not attune to him in any way, shape, or form. She was like, it was awesome. You wouldn't believe it. These guys were just incredible. And she was just like amped up at 10, feeling great. An hour goes by. There's no attunement. He's miserable. She's at 10. Finally, she leaves. The next day, he was like, what was her problem? Was she on drugs? Or was she like, he didn't know. And then she said to me, who was that guy? He was such a downer. What a sad sack. I mean, what was wrong with him? And neither of them had any attunement whatsoever to each other's emotional wave. Now, if a 59.6 were there, maybe they could have helped that communion, or if we would have breathed together or drummed together or come together in some way to synchronize a little bit more. But in that particular case, there was no synchronization. So, yeah. Well, let's move on to just the last few centers here. And I just want to say how absolutely lovely it is having everyone here. And just thank you so much, Lisita, for all of your involvement. I hope you'll be involved every week if you wish, or if you're available. I know you're very busy, so I'm very grateful for you being here. And it's nice to see you as well, Dave. And
part of my wave is that when I'm on the low end of the wave, which is every other day, I tend to not speak much. So you've caught me on a talkative moment.
Okay. Well, and I see that 7 days is going to then offset that. So we might not be seeing you next week, but you're welcome to be here, whether you're in the high or the low wave or talkative or not. We just love having you here. So it's been wonderful, and happy seeing Nancy, Casey, and Christine join in as well. So yeah, let's just talk a little bit about the last centers here. Maybe we'll save the G center for last. What about root? We could talk about root and sacral. I mean, they're different, but
Right.
I guess root. Let's start with the root.
So root is where the circuits start, right? That's all human activity and human enterprise is kickstarted by the pilot light of the root. The root is the get up and do it energy, right? And it pulses, unlike the other energy centers. What else do we want to say about it?
I like what Steve Rhodes says about the root, which is if you look at how we're designed, there's so many incredible ways to interpret the program as a whole, which is the program of self-reflected consciousness, of the evolution of consciousness in form, right? And when you look at what the root is connected to, it gives us some interesting hints in that the root is really connected to the centers that require trying and failing and trying again, and persevering and enduring and having a tremendous amount of, if it doesn't work, we're just going to keep trying.
If the
It's
light goes out, you can light it
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. So kind of like how 2838 can have that struggle to just keep going. And Ra talked about how the other channels from the root to the spleen share that quality of struggle, even though they're not called struggle. We can kind of universalize that all of the root channels have something in common there, regardless. And what does the program think is worth trying again if it doesn't work the first time? And what doesn't it? So obviously spleen, survival, if you're not surviving, and also finding purpose in life and meaning in life through doing things in the material, the success at the tribal level, sending your kids to college. If it doesn't work, try again. Making money, material transformation. I mean, even something as simple as trying to improve your home and trying to kind of, renovate, or getting a haircut. If you don't like it, try again, get a different one. I mean, just the material transformation and operation on the material plane, finding success on the material plane is meant to be to try again if it doesn't work, and just finding that success however that looks, or improving things, right? 1858 and that whole, if you try to improve it and it doesn't work, try again, try to make it better, try to improve things. It's something very fundamental to our human project to improve the world around us and to struggle for purpose and to improve our material conditions and try to achieve success in some way. And so we see on the splenic side that it's all about the material plane. Then we see on the solar plexus side, try to have new experiences, try to get to the spirit, and it's like worth it. If your spirit is in despair, try to do something to get out of that despair, right? If you're stuck somewhere, try to go somewhere else, try to get a new experience in life. There's actually energy for it in how we're designed. The program has designed us to strive for that.
And that one's new. No other animal has that.
That's a good point. Yeah, it is. And then, of course, 1949 to try to bond and to try to marry and to try to set out on the mystical journey and to have religion and to have all of these things that we see on the solar plexus side. The program is telling us these are worth trying. These are worth striving.
Feeling good, not just feeling well, which would be the spleen. Feeling healthy, but feeling good.
Yeah, feeling well on the spleen, feeling good on the solar plexus.
Yeah.
Well, and it also kind of reminds me of what Bergson said about the difference between dogs and cats and I guess what we would call the five-centered mammal versus the human. And he said, well, they have memory, but they don't try to remember and try to forget in the same way that we strive. We have this extra layer of striving. They might, a dog might try to not eat the food you tell it not to, but eventually it's going to eat it. And they will strive. Obviously, they'll strive for survival and they'll strive in certain ways, but humans have different strivings. And then I guess the last thing is really the sacral. And that was a really interesting one of what does it mean these are the format channels. What does it mean if you failed to try again there? And I guess, what is it? Is it trying to find satisfaction? But how do we find satisfaction? Well, Rhodes says something really interesting. And he says it's the sacral center that's ultimately here to be of service. And so he said, if you try to be of service and you can't, try again. If you try and your attempt to be of service is frustrated, it's worth it, having failed to be of service, to find another way. It's like find a way to work, find a way ultimately to have that satisfaction of having worked. The program has designed us that way. But then there's all these things we shouldn't try to do, right? If we look at the love of the G center, it's not meant to try and fail, or the desires of the ego. They're not meant, there's not the same energy for them. It's like, if you're in a relationship and it doesn't work, that's okay. Yeah, sure. You can struggle for purpose together and you can work things out. And I always advocate basically seeing a relationship through to the end, and don't leave it unless you're absolutely positive you've exhausted every possible avenue. But at the same time, you can see that the program itself is not really, we aren't programmed to strive and struggle and endure in certain ways.
You can't force them to activate. You can't be the Fonz hitting the jukebox on the G or on the heart. You know, the heart wants massage, the G center wants, I don't know, grace, I guess. It wants to
surrender.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
sort of like the G center whispers when it's your authority after the whole sounding board process. When it finally speaks you from the inside, it speaks as a whisper, because it's like it has been shown enough of its nature has been shown enough to itself that the spirit is just sort of I don't know, like aroused in a non-energetic way, just sort of appears, it miraculates itself. So the heart is like this sleeping thing that you massage awake to get it to wake up, and the G center is just, you know, the right light at the right time of day gets it to appear.
Yeah, but neither of those requires the root pressure.
Yeah, you don't just push them to start them.
Yeah. And that's also why there's no direct connection from the root to the throat, because if you're trying to communicate to somebody and it's not the right time, it's not the right place, they're not hearing, don't just keep pushing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, try another day or something, right?
Filter it through something else first.
Try next life, it doesn't have to be this life. So, all right. Well, we had a little bit of hints. So yeah.
I wanted to hear from Dave. He unmuted himself. No?
Oh.
Can you tell when I unmute? I don't know. I wasn't going to say anything.
Okay, well, I'd love to say a few things. I was very interested in your exposition about all the different channels coming up from the root, Jonah. That was very interesting, the way you depicted them. I feel like it is possibly true that undefined roots get more stressed than other people, but maybe everybody feels stressed. And I did go to a lecture from this teacher from Germany who talked about the root as the root of all evil. And that whenever we hear ourselves saying we should do something, or we must do it, or I have to take a breath and to realize that you're allowing your root to rule your life, and to calm yourself down and to undo that internal pressure, which can kill us all.
That's really important for the defined roots as well. And I'll say, as a defined root personally, that I've gained so much wisdom from the undefined roots who have helped me notice when I'm pressuring myself or exhausting myself, or even learning how to relax. It's funny, I don't necessarily, as a defined root, I can be an adrenaline junkie and not necessarily notice when I'm burning out. So I really appreciate that. I think that's a great example of undefined root wisdom being able to be really helpful to a defined root. Yeah. And I see Nathan just joined, and so we're just kind of going through the centers, and we have an open discussion. Feel free to jump in anytime. Comment from Casey: her completely open root is hilarious to her. Well, if you'd like to comment more on that, either on voice or on text, you're absolutely.
Sorry, I have the kids, loud, but yeah, my open root, it's like my funniest. It's my only. I only have 3 open centers, and that's the only open center that I have. So, but I'll find myself like driving a lot slower than everybody else for no apparent reason, or I will be speeding for no apparent reason. I literally don't know why. And then I put myself on check, like what's that, cruise control? It really helps. Just things like that. I always find myself like, why am I going this speed,
Well, let's we just have a few more centers to go, and I know that it's getting kind of late here. So let's do the sacral and then the ego and the G center. So I guess the sacral center is one that people make a pretty big deal about. I have a defined sacral, so for me, how I've experienced my defined sacral is, first of all, for much of my life, I ignored it. And then when I started experimenting with human design about 9 months in, I had this incredible week that I called my sacral awakening, during which I couldn't ignore it. And it was probably the strongest impulse that I'd ever experienced in my body. And then after that, it kind of faded, and now it's still there. But it, during that week, it was really an incredible thing where I lost the ability to make myself do things. Like, it wouldn't budge sometimes. It would just be, you know. And then I similarly would find myself just doing things and moving, and, you know, saw like a cigarette on the ground and watched myself pick it up and light it up, or something like that, where I was essentially getting to a state of no thought, but getting to a state where I felt this deep, like, purring motor of almost like a really, like a nice car, like a car that's just, you know, and it was just there. And then if something would happen and it would kind of rev up, or something else would happen and it would, I could feel the loss of libido. And I really knew, even without being able to put it into words, what it felt like to just not even be interested in sex, because life was now sex, you know, to not even be interested in the things that my mind was interested in, because I was so engaged in life. And my libido felt so good that it, something that I would have been griping about and frustrated by before, I just kept moving. And I was just able to just kind of navigate in a really different way, not making mountains out of molehills when something didn't go right, but just going, go on to the next thing. And really just navigating towards that satisfaction, and then noticing the things that would really crush or hamper that, and noticing when I would start to get this no, wrong direction, kind of like that game of Operator where you hear the kind of alarm. Yeah, I started to notice that, and to how to get out of those situations. And I had really incredible experiences that week where, I mean, I've told this story before, it's a very long one, but there were some really interesting experiences during that time where I really verified for myself that this is real and that this is my body and my experience. And it was deeply empowering. And then part of that was really trusting and no longer worrying about, oh, I should stay late, I should get there early, I should do this, I should do that. It was really trusting my sacral to where I'm at a concert, my whole life I'd stayed to the end. Well, now my sacral will be, done, you know, that's it, I'm going to leave now. And I would notice exactly when I was satisfied and exactly when I was full, and I would leave. Or I would notice exactly when I was tired and I would just go to sleep. Or I would notice when I'm not tired and I would do something else, right? So it was really an interesting time in my life where it just radically changed everything about my life, and really became the one thing I can trust in the fog. Maybe I can't see anything, maybe I can't even see tomorrow, but I can trust that.
Nice.
So that's defined sacral. I don't know if any undefined sacral wants to comment, or another defined sacral who has their own version of that. Mike, any comment?
I don't know. Yeah, it's undefined sacral. You don't know when enough is enough. What you were saying about it.
Well, but you know when enough is enough. I mean, some people don't, right? I guess we could say, or it's possible not to. Wait, do you actually feel like you don't? Because I think you're, well, Mike, to me, is incredible at this. Like last night, you left before the party was over.
That was too late.
It was too late. Okay. Well, generally speaking, I
rushed before Mike.
Okay.
Yeah, that was incredible.
And you have a defined sacral. Yeah. No, but generally speaking, I'm very impressed with Mike catching the peaks of things and having this wonderful timing for really catching the best moments and then dipping out. Like normally you don't stay late at all. Normally you just actually only stay for an hour or two at any given time or place. Really.
Good. Gotta be on the move. Triple split, quad left.
Yeah.
Triple,
yeah, triple split, quad left.
Zip. Well, at the start of your story, you just mentioned how the sacral is such an important center. Like Mother Nature thinks it's such an important center. It's what is life. Single-celled organisms have a sacral, rocks don't. You know, that's the separation of what is and isn't life. Is sacral. Sacral is the life force.
Good point. Good point. Well, energy. I just want to keep. Oh yeah. Do you have some comments, Dave? Please.
I was gonna say that, like, since starting human design, like the knowing, like the enough is enough thing is kind of one of the big revelations for me. And like now, especially because I have the 34-6, which is common sense, knowing when enough is enough. I don't know if that's, I mean, it's in red, but still, I just feel like I can just, I'm ready to go. I'm done. Like when I'm done, I'm done. Like there's no pushing through it anymore. Like I mean, I can, if I want, if I have to, I can harness the sacral energy and I'll get buzzed out and I'll be up all night. Like even if I do leave early, but like I at least I leave. Like I will go. I'm sort of like happy to do it. It's like this new thing that I'm like, oh, this is it. This is the enough thing. Like I'll be all like, I just saw it. I noticed it. This is my new superpower.
Cool.
Well, I saw that a lot at the HDHD conference, and I don't know if you might also comment on the G Center to kind of go towards that, because I think a lot of the G Center, I think of it as often having a fear of missing out, or like, what if I'm not in the right place? Maybe there's somewhere else I should be. I was so impressed with you as an undefined G, undefined sacral, not pushing it and not worrying about missing things. I guess you may be worried a little bit about missing the trivia night, but honestly, I mean, we had such a fun time when we did all that together.
I got a little bit FOMO about the Saturday night dance party, but yeah, I mean, I was just trying to be receptive, you know, just trying to be non-strategic and non-agenda having.
I saw
I mean,
that.
I didn't look at the schedule once. Like I could not, I'd have to be depending on people, like word of mouth, to know what was going on, because I just did not look at the schedule.
Yeah, and for those who don't know Dave's chart, he is a 5-2 manifester, 12, 22, 35, 36, and as with all 5-2s, is innocence. And yeah, I just love that you were so innocent about it, and you were able to just say, hey, I'm not feeling it right now. I'm going to leave, even though maybe you planned or had an idea of planning to be there, but you're like, planning isn't for you. Like,
right, we were about to do trivia, like it was like seconds away, and I was just like, dude, I gotta go.
Yeah, I had so much.
You were like, oh, Mike can do it.
And then Mike's like, what?
Thank you, Mike, by the way.
Yeah, well, it worked out great because Mike and Diana were judges, and then they ended up getting some other judges too. And then I got to be the undefined throat narrator, which of course I like doing. So yeah.
Trust in the mechanics. What do you think about the saving G and heart for next week, since those go together so
Yeah,
well? We can
that's
really
a great
deep dive on that.
Okay, that's a good topic. Yeah, let's do that for next week. We'll deep dive. I have a lot of ideas on both. So that'll be good. Let's do that next year. We'll do a deep dive on the spiritual and the mundane hearts.
And how there used to be one center. We can bring some history.
Well, that's my own heresy. I don't know if anyone
Right.
else agrees with that, but I talk a lot about that. Yeah, I think that you were. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Anu. In case you can't see, I'm petting Anu. This is Anu here. Yeah, she's just been wonderful. She's been so happy, and all of you are wonderful. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Lucita. Such a joy, and I hope you will join us again. It was so wonderful having you. And the questions, Christine, Nathan, Casey, Nancy, and of course Dave. Really sweet seeing you all here, and yeah, till next time. Thank you so much. End meeting for all.